Venezuela is neither communist or socialist. Today we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
One of the main mistakes that internationals made in the country, especially Western internationals, is that they speak, and I'm talking people that never have been on the country and they only get information from mainstream media, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle, whatever might be the case. And they are lying regarding the information about Venezuela. So they have the last decade information that we had a crisis that was awful. It's not like things are excellent, but we are on a growing trend. However, many people mentions that they think that Venezuela is a socialist communist nation, and is not the case. Venezuela right now is a crony capitalistic nation. Now let's explain why these people are mistaken regarding the communist socialist thing. So it has a reason why. First, let's go, we have to do like an history review in order to figure that out. The Venezuelan recent history starts on the 50s during the government of Marcos Pérez Jiménez, that he was a dictator actually. He was a right-wing dictator. And the economy did actually very good on those days, but on social issues, we had a curfew on the country, stuff like that. But the country actually was, regarding the public administration, were pretty well, actually. And a lot of infrastructure were built back then. However, at some point, people just got tired because nobody likes, I'm sorry the word, an asshole dictator. And at the end, a lot of protests, mass protests, and so on. And so people say, you know what, we don't want a dictator, we want democracy. And this particular man, after a few days, said, okay, you know what, you got it. It was a peaceful thing. He got exiled to Madrid, and he lived like 30 years in Madrid, something that nature. Anyways, so after that, we had what is known as the Pacto de Punto Fijo Pact. Punto Fijo is an area of Venezuela. And after that, in the late 50s, basically we had a 40-year period of democracy that is known in Venezuela as the Fourth Republic. And the people in charge back then were two political parties. One is called Acción Democrática, or AD. They are still actually going right now, that party exists. And the other one is called COPEI. COPEI, they were a Christian socio-democrat thing. Both are socio-democrats, by the way. Social democrats. And both parties actually exist today, even with the Chavismo. So these people, basically, they had 5-year presidents, presidential term of 5 years. And they basically flip in charge every 5 years, of course, throughout an election, fair election, let's call it. And then they were very popular. They kind of kept the same things of the previous government, the dictatorship government of Marcos Pérez Jiménez, but now with democracy. And on the 60s, actually, the situation ran pretty smoothly. The Venezuelan economy was growing, great standards of living, and also with social programs. I mean, they were social democrats. And by the way, back then we had free college, we had free healthcare. Also, for some people, they had free housing as well. But the standards of living overall, they were great. I mean, people, it's not like they lived throughout the government. They had good jobs and also good businesses and so on and so on. And actually, many people from abroad, from Western Europe, came to the country. People from Italy, from Germany after World War II, people from France, from a bunch of Spaniards, a bunch of Portuguese, and of course the rest of Latin America, including Colombia, and Southeast Asia, and mostly China actually, from the Middle East. So Venezuela, everything was great on the 50s and 60s. Now, in the 70s, here's what happens, the funny thing. On the year, I believe, is 73, we had the Yom Kippur War. Of course, right now that we have the issues in Israel, we had the Yom Kippur War that, in case you don't know, is the war that Israel had with a bunch of their Middle Eastern neighbors, the Arab nations, and basically Israel wiped them out. The Arab nations were, of course, very unpleased by the situation. They tried to negotiate something with the United States. United States and the Western world supported Israel, like, well, they're doing right now, actually. And, of course, they got pissed off, the Arab nations. Also, by those days, the OPEC, the Organization for Petroleum Exported Nations, exporter countries, they got together and they embargoed the crude oil from the Middle East to the rest of the world. That created a massive energy crisis and shortages throughout the world, especially in the United States. And what happened, despite the fact that Venezuela is part of the OPEC with all of these Arab nations, including Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and so on. Venezuela actually at the moment, was the only nation that was very favorable to the West. Venezuela had always a great relationship with the United States before the Chavismo, but I don't want to get ahead right now. So at the moment, Venezuela said, you know what, we can cover the oil from the Arab nations. At the moment, the price of crude oil skyrocketed, and Venezuela, take advantage. And Venezuela on the 70s was rich. It was called the Saudi Venezuela. And back then, the standards of living, sadly, I wasn't born back then, were excellent. Throughout the 70s, middle-class people travel every week to Miami, to New York, to Hawaii, to Paris. We had the Concorde flight, the supersonic flight. Only a handful of countries and a handful of destinations all over the world had the Concorde supersonic flight, like 5 or 6. One of them is Caracas. The first one came to Caracas before New York. Imagine that. So we have 50 flights per hour to Margarita Island. Imagine that. So everything, money was raining from the sky to Venezuelans. On the late 70s, what happened is at the moment, the Venezuelan politicians back then, and that's what I very hated right now, and can't get too far, starting by a very, let's say, infamous but popular president that we had in Venezuela from AD, this political social democrat party. His name is Carlos Andrés Perez. It's this gentleman right here. He was huge. He is a political animal. He was a political animal. He passed away. Well, he was a populist. He was a center-left populist. And he started to create social welfare, social programs. Now, we always had social programs back then, talking free college, free healthcare, stuff like that, but you have also the private options. Anyways, what happened is he started to tampering and messing with economic laws. He halted imports, so created taxes in order to favor companies within Venezuela, so that made everything more expensive in the country. So they started to increase a lot public spending from doing a populist strategy, a center-left populist strategy. So they squandered a lot of money. They only protected some empresarios within the Venezuela. They made imports more expensive and so on and so on. Eventually, the situation with the Middle East got figured out. And by the 80s, we had what was called the Black Friday. It's not the Black Friday that you have after Thanksgiving in the US. Black Friday was a moment, an economic situation when the Venezuelan currency got devalued, and that created a lot of economic hardships for Venezuelans back then. At the moment, the standards of living were excellent. Venezuela at the moment was top 10 regarding GDP per capita. And afterwards, the standards of living of Venezuelans started to decrease. So the 80s standards of living are keeping up decreasing. And by the 90s, the situation, Venezuela was become very insecure on the 90s. I'm talking street crime. Right now is more safe, I have to say, way more safe compared to the 90s. A lot of robberies and kidnaps and so on. And also the politicians these center-left politicians that actually were very good friends with the United States, both Democrats and Republicans, by the way. And those politicians became hated by the Venezuelan population, so they had it. And on 98, we had an election. That's when Hugo Chavez comes. In case you don't know, Hugo Chavez was a former military lieutenant colonel. and he tried to make a coup to the Venezuelan government on 92, and it was unsuccessful. He got arrested, him and his cronies got arrested and then liberated, just released just a few years afterwards. They had a very comfortable incarceration. Well, he was very popular, and in 98 he came to power. He won the election. 99 came to power, changed the constitution. He do it legally, by the way. And after wars, he had a black swan event on his favor. That it was on 2003, starts the war on Iraq and Afghanistan and a bunch of conflict on the Middle East throughout a decade mostly, and the price of crude oil got over $100 per barrel, and that, of course, that provoked a great cash flow to the country, and that helped a lot Chavez. Chavez was a socialist, Marxist, communist. He was all the isms, the bad isms. Well, anyways, but he had a strong grip throughout his people. He was the man in charge, de facto, and everyone else was not able. They were not able to challenge him or even suggest something different. He had full control, except for the Cuban team that also they are communists and socialists and so on. Okay, Chavez got a lot of cash flow, but that money got squandered on social programs, social benefits. They built houses and so on, and they had some. Actually, he kind of helped a bunch of poor people. But just it was just handouts, not something tangible. Although he constructed a lot of public housing, Maduro did the same. Actually, I have to be fair on that particular regard, and also some healthcare programs. But it was just handouts, nothing that you can build into the future. So right now we arrived to early 2010, so 2010. And at the moment, Venezuela, it was a socialist, and now I can say socialist, but a rich socialist nation because we have the income from the crude oil. At the moment, there was a lot of corruption on the state-owned company PDVSA. Thank you to this man, Rafael Ramirez. He was the president of PDVSA during the Chavismo era, during the Chavez era. Well, he and his cronies stole $500 billion, something like that. It's an unimaginable number, besides the U.S. debt, by the way. But besides that's the biggest number that I've seen regarding U.S. dollars, besides the U.S. debt. Well, anyways, something like around $500 billion got squandered thanks to Rafael Ramirez, and he had basically destroyed the Venezuelan oil industry. The Venezuelan oil industry went from 3 million barrels of crude oil per day to a bottom of 400,000. That was during COVID, by the way. And right now we are on 800,000. Now, at the moment, let's say people on the early 2010s, they rejected a lot the Chavismo, especially Chavez. A lot of protests that happened. The most draconians were on 2014 and 2017. But many people actually didn't like Chavez and the Chavismo overall. Then Chavez passed away on, depending who you ask, late 2012, early 2013. Afterwards, Maduro wins the election and gets in power. And Maduro, the first 4 years, he kept the socialist, communist mindset of the Chavismo until 2017, when we had a very dreadful mass protest that like 1,000 people died in those protests. And afterwards, Maduro said, okay, I'm going to keep it easy. I need to do a 180. And actually, they allowed some, let's say, free market, neoliberal measurements, like liberating the U.S. currency, fluctuating on the market, the Venezuelan Bolivar compared to the USD, actually. And also they allow people to imports and importar. They reduce the taxes for importing goods to the country. We had a bunch of scarcity back then, provoked by the socialist and communist things. However, and also he started working with cryptocurrencies and so on in 2018. At the moment, the Venezuelan government had a thing with cryptocurrencies. Anyway, but yeah, you can see that by 2018, the mindset shifted within the government. By the way, Venezuelan people, since like a decade or something ago, they hate socialism. Already explained it on another video. But the mindset of the government changed from socialism to a crony capitalistic mindset on 2018, and right now that's kind of what we have. We have more goods and services. We have products from all over the world. Even we have more variety compared to the Fourth Republic before the Chavismo. Funny thing, you can go to a grocery here in Venezuela, go grocery shopping, and find products from all over the world. That didn't happen on the Fourth Republic, by the way. So the bottom line is Venezuela socialist communism? No. It was, during the period, it was a social democracy between the mid-70s to the late 90s. During that period, it was a social democracy. There were social democrats, the people over there. Afterwards, we have socialism from the early 2000s, the bad kind, the red one, on the early 2000s, combined with, hefty income from the oil revenue. And then we have communism on the early 2010s. The 2010s, we have hard communism until 2017, till early 2018. And after early 2018, until this day, we have crony capitalism. That can sum it up.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.